Let's see if I can get that to connect. So 1 second, I think he will be on in just a second. Oh, yay, we got it to work.
Yay! It's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks again for the amazing conversation in the podcast. I hope that people have been enjoying it, and I'm excited to answer some questions.
Well, I think they have really enjoyed it. We've had thousands of people listen to it, but I've had so many questions. And then I put that little poll on my stories, and it just got flooded with questions. So I've typed up so many things that they wanted to know. Plus, if you guys have questions as we go, just type them in the comments, and we'll try to see those as well. So,
Perfect.
okay. So one of the big questions I keep getting is because, we talked about the gut being like a rainforest, and we
hmm
talked about snakes and needing the snakes, but everybody's saying, well, why do we need bad bacteria? Why can't we just have good bacteria? What's the bad bacteria even doing?
Well, I think, look, I'll be the first person to say that I fall into the trap myself of defining bacteria as good versus bad. And it's a little bit of a tricky thing because it's kind of like calling a human being a bad person when, there may be people who we don't, they act immoral, but many times they have great qualities too. And we just want to see those great qualities come out. So many of these bacteria, what you find, Carolyn, is that context becomes very important. So it's not quite so simply as they are categorically bad or that they are categorically good. It's more so that if you surround them in a certain environment, they can behave improperly, just like, I mean, gosh, our kids can sometimes, right?
Right?
Or if you surround them with the right environment, then they're not really problematic at all. And so I think that the reason why I sort of put my foot on the brake when it comes to this concept is that I feel like the solution when we don't have like a great understanding of complex topics is many times just like, shut it down, go and blast them, let's get rid of them. And the problem is that many times we emerge on the other side of that and we discover that the idea of decimation and destruction is not actually the best plan, that instead it's much better to build up the good guys. Build up the good guys. And so, it's kind of like global politics. Like we tend to be better off when we go to countries and we help them to do better as opposed to us going and dropping bombs on them.
So we want to nourish the good bacteria in our guts. We want to nourish the bacteria in our guts so that they can do their best job for our health.
Absolutely. And, going back to the snake analogy, it's, we don't want a jungle that's overrun with snakes, right? That would be a jungle that lacks balance. But we do want to acknowledge that in moderation, having some snakes in the jungle can actually be a good thing.
Okay, so I had lots of questions about antibiotics with all these bacteria. Do antibiotics wipe out all the bacteria, some of the bacteria? And people wanted to know, after they take antibiotics, what you recommend they should do.
These are questions that I get DMs about literally every day. I'm glad that we have 374 people here so that we can basically clear the air on this topic. Number one, antibiotics do more harm than we should feel comfortable with. And that's not to vilify them. Antibiotics, like literally the discovery of penicillin, added more years to our life expectancy than any other discovery in the last 100 years. But the overutilization
Yeah.
of unnecessary antibiotics is problematic. And what happens is, like, for example, take Cipro. All right. So we have 400 people here. You guys give me a wave or give me a yes if you've ever heard of the antibiotic Cipro. Very commonly used to treat urinary tract infections, to treat digestive issues, diverticulitis. If you have diarrhea, they might give you this. Just 5 days of Cipro, Carolyn, will wipe out about a third
Oh,
of,
wow.
of your gut microbiome. Now, a third of your gut microbiome means that you just wiped out about 13 trillion
Wow.
living organisms. And it's not just the bad guys that you're destroying. I wish that were true, but instead it's just, you're just dropping napalm. And so we got a lot of people, Carolyn, who have heard of Cipro. I mean, this is not a rare antibiotic. So, okay, so what do we do when we are prescribed an antibiotic? Step one, have a conversation with your doctor, which is completely appropriate, to ask, is this necessary? Like, do I need these antibiotics? And by the way, when we're advocating for our children, because I'm a father and you're a mother, Carolyn, when we're advocating for our children, we should do the same thing with our pediatricians. Are these antibiotics necessary? What happens if we don't take the antibiotics?
What are the other options?
What are the other options? When it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. So you take the antibiotics, but what we want to do is we want to support and build up the healthy, good gut microbes throughout this period of time. So we want to continue with the fiber, continue with the plants in the diet. And when we get to the other side, you come off of the antibiotic. This is where what we want to do is we want to make sure, like, no alcohol, no ultra processed foods, no ultra refined sugars. Let's avoid sabotaging our own gut. Let's instead feed the good guys the good food that they want, the fiber, build them up. Let's exercise. Let's spend time outdoors. Let's pet the dog. Let's give a hug to someone that you love. Let's put our hand in some dirt and do some gardening. Let's do all those things and your gut microbiome will recover. And then the last thing, Carolyn, is the question of probiotics. So it's actually a bit of a controversy within my specialty, gastroenterology, whether or not to give probiotics to a person who is recovering from antibiotics. I'll spare you the details of the debate on both sides. You can make an argument for or against.
I've seen the research for both. So,
and I do in some cases recommend probiotics to my patients, but I don't do it categorically. That being said, if you were to do a probiotic, the one that I would recommend is called Saccharomyces boulardii. Okay, I'll tell you what, guys. I'll type that real quick into the message box.
I might have to spell that for us.
Yep. So you want to get Saccharomyces boulardii, and this is actually a very healthy form of yeast. Okay, don't be scared away by the name yeast because there are many good forms of yeast, and this is one of them. And the nice thing about Saccharomyces boulardii is that you can take it while you're still taking the antibiotic, and the antibiotic will not affect the Saccharomyces, so you're already giving yourself a protective layer with this probiotic.
Oh, that's great. So if people are taking an antibiotic, because there are times that they are life-saving at times, so
right.
If they're taking an antibiotic, then you're just saying to really focus on the good fiber, lots of foods with lots of fiber, staying away from the sugar, exercising, getting good sleep, all the things that will help build the nourishing bacteria.
Yeah, I mean, it's just back to the basics. Like, that's the ideal time to double and triple down on these concepts that you and I both teach as being very important for human health. Double and triple down, like avoid the processed foods, avoid the sugar, avoid the alcohol, get a good night's rest, get some exercise, eat some high fiber foods, and your gut will recover very quickly.
Okay, and you said to avoid the alcohol during this time. A lot of people asked if coffee plays a role in the gut, like good or bad, and same with dairy. They wanted to know your thoughts on dairy on the gut.
Carolyn, you're drawing me into some debated
topics.
These are some debated topics.
That's why they all want to know what's, the truth.
It's not necessarily true that coffee is categorically recommended for all people, or that you are missing out if you don't drink coffee. There are some parts to coffee that are good. But it's not the caffeine. It's actually that it has what are called polyphenols. And polyphenols you will find in many different foods.
Right.
And so it's not just coffee, nor do you need to drink coffee specifically to get polyphenols. You can get them from all different fruits, vegetables, whole grains, seeds, nuts, legumes. They all have polyphenols. And polyphenols are good for the gut microbiome. I'll give you another example, Carolyn. So you brought up, you mentioned alcohol. So some people will make the argument that red wine is good for the gut. All right. But I wrote in my book that, like, look, if you want to drink a glass of wine, so be it. That's up to you. But what I wrote in my book is that I don't see this as actually being good for the gut. And the reason why is because, yes, red wine contains resveratrol. Resveratrol is a polyphenol, and resveratrol is good for your gut microbes. But alcohol is not. Alcohol is not good for your gut microbes. And you can get resveratrol without the baggage by eating berries,
Yep.
or even peanuts.
Or lots of things.
Right. Exactly. So with regard to these things, I don't think that coffee is necessary for a healthy gut. I don't think that alcohol is good for gut health. And when it comes to milk, what I will say is this. If a person comes to my clinic and they're having diarrhea, or they're having gas and bloating after meals, and they consume dairy, typically the first thing that I will recommend is to remove dairy from their diet and see how they feel. And that's less about it causing damage to the gut and more about lactose intolerance, which is that people are not tolerating their lactose. And that's a huge percentage of people out there.
So it's not the dairy is not necessarily in the gut.
Dairy is not necessary for the gut. It's a debated topic, and there's parts to the argument that one could make that to say that it is. But the problem is, Carolyn, that when we zoom out and we look at the connection between dairy and other conditions, like for example, there's a very clear connection between dairy consumption and prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is the number one cause of cancer death among men in the United States, right? So I think that the problem is when you zoom out and you look, there was a great review article in the New England Journal of Medicine that was written on this topic. It's a prestigious journal, and they wrote on this topic. And basically, when you go down the line and you start looking at it, it's hard to make a compelling argument that we should be going for more dairy. That's for sure. If anything, we should be moving in the opposite direction.
Okay. Those were good answers. All right. I had a lot of people want to know the relationship between gut health and mental health. And I know we talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but I talk about it quite a bit. So I think they just want to hear from you what your take is on that.
It's so powerful. I'm very excited. I don't think that you and I talked about this, but I'm actually working on a research study right now. Perhaps we did. I'm working on a research study right now looking at the connection between food, gut microbes, and mood. And it's not ready for prime time or conversation yet, but I can't wait to share it when it is ready for prime time to talk about, because I think it's going to be fascinating. This connection is real. There is no question about it. We've known for a long time that food is connected to our mood. There are some landmark scientists around the world who have been studying this for decades. And now what we're seeing is food is also connected to microbes, and microbes are connected to mood. And so basically it's all starting to come together that you can't really separate these things out. And, part of it is that your gut it's basically a chemical factory. It's constantly taking the food that is in your diet and changing it, transforming it, and creating chemicals in a good way. Chemicals in a good way, where those biochemicals spread throughout the body and basically create signals within the brain and can create inflammation, for example, or can suppress inflammation. And these are things that clearly have an effect on our mood. So I think that it's quite indisputable at this point that there is a very powerful connection that's there, Carolyn, and we're continuing to learn more and more about it.
Well, and so many neurotransmitters are regulated, created, things like that in the gut.
Yeah, there's actually, so I graduated medical school, and this was in 2006. And if you asked me when I graduated, like at that point I'm a doctor, and if you asked me, hey doc, how many neurotransmitters are there in the gut? I would say there's probably like 6, maybe 8. There's over 30.
I was going to say more than that.
Yeah, there's over 30 neurotransmitters in the gut. 90% of our serotonin is produced in the gut. 50% of our dopamine is produced in our gut. There's ways where the gut is actually producing precursors to neurotransmitters like 5-HT, which can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. So there's a lot going on there, and we could get very complicated in terms of some of the ways that this works. But the bottom line is that it's quite simple when you zoom out and you see that food comes into contact with your gut microbes, and that will alter your mood.
Okay, so I get this question. I get asked, well, okay, if mental health is connected to the gut, like neurotransmitters are connected to the gut, why can't I feed my gut sugar? Like the neurotransmitters are still going to be regulated in the gut, so why can't it just be sugar, sugar, sugar?
Oh dear. I would not recommend that. And the reason why is because, let's go back to this concept that your gut is basically creating signaling molecules. And when you properly feed the gut, when you fuel it with the preferred food like fiber, you are going to have a gut that's going to produce anti-inflammatory signaling molecules. But the flip side is also true. Your gut microbiome can be transformed into something that is creating inflammation. And the way that this happens is through the consumption of foods that are inflammatory. So ultra processed foods, refined sugars, things of this variety are like when we say they're inflammatory foods, really what we're saying is that you are activating the wrong microbes in the gut and you're creating systemic inflammation because of these microbes in the gut.
Oh, that's interesting. I like it explained that way. It's interesting because on social media, there are a lot of people out there claiming like food is not medicine, food does not affect you. When we have so much science and research showing it does, why do you think they love to tout that?
I think that the reality of the world that we live in 2021, Carolyn, is that people go to the internet and they love to be told what they want to hear. And there are enough people out there that want to hear every single type of opinion under the sun. And so because they're looking for that, if a person plants their flag and says, hey, I'm here to tell you what you want to hear, that you can eat all these junk foods and it's not going to have any negative effect on your body whatsoever, that's ridiculous. But the problem is that there are going to be people who are going to say that. And this is part of what creates mass confusion. And I do think that there's a lot of complexity to it, because the other thing too, Carolyn, is that there are powerful companies that have the financial means to basically weaponize the internet. We've seen it on a number of levels. This is not just a nutrition thing. We've seen this on a number of levels. Powerful companies can weaponize the internet because if you are currently in power and you create confusion, guess what? The status quo will continue to reign supreme. It's hard to get people to move or to shift if they are confused and they are looking around and going and throwing their hands up and going, I don't even know who to believe anymore.
Right.
And I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we'll leave that aside because that's a whole other topic. I have a lot of different illnesses that people, well, not illnesses and things like birth control. So bunch of questions on illnesses I'm going to ask you, but one that I got a ton on does the pill destroy the gut at all? Or is that a myth?
So the pill, oral contraceptive pill.
Yes.
Look, let me say this, like there is a lot, we need to be humble when we come into these conversations, in the sense that we need to acknowledge that there's so much that we don't know. And I mean, I sincerely believe that there's complexity to our body that is far beyond what our mind will ever be capable of understanding. And so with that in mind, we do have some research that raises concerns about oral contraceptive pills. In population-based studies, there has been a connection between oral contraceptive pills and the development of inflammatory bowel disease. And this is, so inflammatory bowel disease, for those who are wondering, I'm referring to really two different conditions that are similar in some ways. They're kind of like cousins: ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. These are chronic inflammatory disorders where the immune system is on the attack. Your immune system is on the attack. And so the thing that ties both ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease together is that very powerfully, they are connected to dysbiosis, damage to the gut microbiome. Like, the genesis of ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease is through dysbiosis, damage to the gut. So
Right.
if these studies are true, which I would welcome more research, okay? I'm just here to say that, like, this is what we're seeing so far, but I want more. If these studies are true, then it's quite indisputable that oral contraceptive pills would be having a negative effect on the gut microbiome in at least some people, for sure.
Okay. I love that you are just real about it. Like, we need more research, but if those are true, so thank you for being real about that. Okay, people want to know about acid reflux and what that has to do with the gut.
Okay, acid reflux is an interesting topic. So huge percentage of people who have acid reflux, and it used to be that if you went back to when I was in medical school 15 years ago, the idea was, oh, well, you're carrying too much weight around your waist, right? You must be overweight, and that's what's causing your acid reflux. Well, I'm like, hold on, I'm a gastroenterologist, and like most of my patients are not way overweight, and they have acid reflux.
Right.
And so there must be more to it. So actually, it was my mentors, two of my mentors in Chicago, John Pandolfino and Peter Corellis, who helped us to understand that there is a motility disturbance that exists within the esophagus. So what I'm referring to is the way that the esophagus squeezes and pushes stuff through. All right, so there's a motility disturbance that exists in acid reflux, but even that by itself doesn't fully explain it. So, Carolyn, here we are, 2021 update for the 600 people who are here. The update is that we do believe that the gut microbiome is connected to the manifestation of acid reflux. It probably does involve some motility disturbance, but we think it's connected. And here's how I'm going to prove it to you. Okay. So you take medications to reduce stomach acid. People feel better when they have acid reflux. But we have studies where people increase their fiber intake. And guess what happens? Improvement in their acid reflux. In fact, I recommend this to all of my patients who have acid reflux. Increase your fiber intake. Why would that be? Because fiber does not neutralize or affect stomach acid at all. And the answer is that fiber does affect microbes. And that's why that's relevant. So a couple quick tips for the people who do have acid reflux. Increase your fiber intake. There was a study with a plant predominant Mediterranean diet. It was not a vegan diet. It was a Mediterranean diet that was plant predominant, showed significant benefit for acid reflux. And there was a study where people took the alcohol and the caffeine, dropped it, replaced it with water, and their acid reflux got better. So I don't mean to be the person who's like taking away all your fun, but if I take away some of your fun, you'll feel better. And you may not need to take medication, and that's a good thing.
So, does acid reflux correlate with low stomach acid?
All right, so there are different schools of thought that exist with regard to the manifestation of acid reflux. So for example, in the allopathic, like Western medical world that I came from, the idea is that if you cut stomach acid, things improve. And that's where these medications like proton pump inhibitors, Nexium and Prilosec and Prevacid, that's what they do. They cut stomach acid. Do they work? Well, we do have phase 3 clinical trials that show that they work compared to a placebo. So it's clear that they work. It's just that the problem is that people never come off of them.
Right.
And there's an issue there. So now there is also an argument that's made really more in the naturopathic space that it's a deficiency of stomach acid that is problematic. All right. So now, do I have hard clinical trials to prove that that is true? No, I do not. Have I seen people who augment their stomach acid and they feel better? Yes. Do I have patients who have augmented their stomach acid and felt worse? Yes. Here's the good news, Carolyn, and this is for the people who are here with acid reflux. The good news is this. When you have acid reflux, no matter what you choose to do, no matter what strategy you choose to follow, your body will give you feedback on whether or not it is working.
True.
If your symptoms get better, you know it's working. If your symptoms get worse, it's not.
Okay, so people can try suppressing stomach acid or increasing it.
Let me put it this way. So I'm a gastroenterologist. My job is supposed to be to write as many prescriptions for stomach suppressing medication as possible. That's what we're trained to do. I don't like doing it. It doesn't mean it's a hard stop. I do it. There are cases where I do it. But it's always, the key is this. It's never indefinite. It's never in perpetuity. It is always as a temporary measure to achieve a goal so that I can withdraw the medicine. And that's the important thing.
Because there's an underlying root cause, and it might be that they just need more fiber.
Thank you.
Look for the
exactly. Always.
Okay. So talking about fiber, I've had lots of people, some of these questions have said, well, what type of fiber? Does it really matter if and I got this question too. They're saying, does it matter if I get my fiber from like plants and seeds, or can I get it from like a fiber supplement powder?
Okay, so here's the key so there is a role for fiber supplements. Let's start with this. Okay, here's our starting point. 95% of Americans are not getting the recommended amount of fiber.
Right.
I am convinced this is our most prevalent deficiency, and it is destroying our gut microbiome. And then I can show you how by destroying the gut microbiome, it connects to all of these, chronic diseases that we are seeing pop up, right? So I want to see people get more fiber. In my clinic, when you are suffering with digestive issues, because that's what I do for a living, I take care of these people. The fastest way for me to get them the fiber that they need is to start them on a supplement.
Okay.
So I will start them on a supplement. I do believe that there is a role for it, but I'm of the belief that you need to allow your diet to do the heavy lifting. And so at the end of the day, it's not that I exclude supplements, and it's not that I only do supplements. It's instead that I think that there's a blend between the two, and we want to have our diet lead the charge, and then we want to take it to the next level with a little bit of supplementation to achieve our goals.
I love that. And what I also want to say is you can't have a diet of Oreos and Frosted Flakes all day long and take the fiber supplement and hope that it's doing its job. So you're going to give them the fiber supplement as they learn to eat more fruits and vegetables and seeds and things like that.
Yeah, you can't, so I'm not opposed to supplements. There's clearly a role for supplements. I see patients in my clinic every day who benefit from supplements, but you can't supplement your way from a C- gut to an A+ and do nothing else.
Right.
You got to be prepared to step up, make the dietary change, make the lifestyle changes, and then add the supplements where needed to reinforce it, to optimize it, to take it to the next level.
Okay, perfect. Okay, some other health issues. People want to know about SIBO. Best ways to, those dealing with SIBO, should they take a probiotic, not take a probiotic? What's the best way to help them?
Very complicated topic. Very complicated topic. Carolyn, you're catching me on all the spots here.
About that.
It's because you have
for wanting.
Yeah, it's because you have an informed audience and they're asking good questions. So, all right. So the deal with SIBO is this. we have real, let me just be upfront and describe to you guys who are with us here today some of the challenges that we face on the clinical side from my perspective. Our testing for SIBO is not good. I have no doubt that SIBO exists. But the problem is that if the test has false positives and false negatives, then how do you know whether or not it's real? And how do you study it? If you can't properly test for it, how do you even study it to know more about it? So SIBO is real, but in virtually all cases, except for the person who has had surgery on their intestines and like had part of their intestine removed, in virtually all cases, there is an explanation for what is going on with SIBO. There is a root cause. It is not that, oh, your diagnosis is SIBO. It's that you have this other thing that's happening, and because of that other thing, you have SIBO.
Oh, that's interesting.
So in my clinic, by the way, someone asks, what is SIBO? So SIBO stands for, it's an acronym, stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Okay, so it basically means that you're supposed to have all these gut bugs in your colon, which is the large intestine. And in SIBO, these gut bugs are getting up into the small intestine where they're not supposed to be. And because they're there, they will ferment the food, they will cause gas, they will many times give people diarrhea. All right, so that's the issue. Now, conventional wisdom in SIBO is destroy the microbes. And the problem is that, like, for example, there's a medicine called rifaximin, okay, Xifaxan. And we are literally taught, the drug reps come to our office and they say, write the prescription with 2 refills. Why? Because most patients relapse, so they're temporarily better, and then the problem comes back. And if you write it for 2 refills, they can get it refilled 2 times and just take it again. Okay, so 3 rounds of antibiotics.
Wow.
So, and that's because we're not addressing the root of the problem. So if you believe that you have SIBO, I would encourage you, rather than like blasting with antibiotics, recognizing that virtually everyone relapses after that, and you probably are less healthy in terms of your gut because of the antibiotics, I would instead recommend that you do a root cause investigation. Carolyn, I'll give you a quick example. In most of these patients, in a huge percentage of these patients, I shouldn't say most, but in a huge percentage of these patients, I find that there is constipation. In another very large percentage, I will find that there is something like, for example, lactose intolerance, the deficiency of an enzyme. By the way, you guys who have bloating, gas, I want you to write this down, okay? Sucrose intolerance. This is table sugar. Sucrose is table sugar.
I love that. I'm going to start using that.
Okay, Carolyn, this is crazy. Everyone hears about celiac disease. Tons of hype around celiac. Yes, you need to be tested for celiac disease, and I wrote about this in great detail in my book. Okay, but in addition to celiac disease, you need to be tested for sucrose intolerance because you could be lacking the enzyme, which is called sucrase. Table sugar is everywhere, including, like, you could eliminate processed foods. There's still sucrose in healthy food. Okay, so this table sugar, if you lack this enzyme, is going to cause gas, bloating, abdominal distress, potentially diarrhea. And I diagnose this, Carolyn, all the time. The other day, I diagnosed like literally 3 people in one day with sucrose intolerance. So these people, they come to me and they're like, I think I have SIBO. Okay, let me check your sucrase breath test, which, by the way, is free. It's completely free to do the test. Yeah. So let me check your sucrase breath test. Oh, your sucrase breath test is abnormal. We need to work on this sucrose intolerance that you have, and that is going to fix your problem. And you see that these issues get better.
So how do you fix that if they're lacking that enzyme?
So there's actually a completely safe, derived from a natural source supplement that is available and it's called Sucrade. And your insurance company will cover Sucrade if you are diagnosed with sucrose intolerance, because it's actually a congenital disorder. And we used to think that this was like a rare congenital disorder, congenital meaning that you're born with it. We used to think this was rare. It's not. I mean, I'm telling you, this is like literally 10% of my patients who have gas and bloating.
That's so interesting, because when you talk about gas and bloating, that's usually not a topic that people bring up, but as to why people are experiencing that.
Exactly. And so now gas and bloating, if you want, I could do a quick little tutorial on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I get asked all the time about gas and bloating, and so go for it.
Okay. So by the way, someone asked real quick, why is the sucrose intolerance breath test valid, but the SIBO breath test is not? So the SIBO breath test, the issue is that there's a gold standard test, and you compare the breath test to the gold standard. And basically you can tell the performance of a test. And the problem with the SIBO breath test is that it does not perform well. There's different types of SIBO breath tests. It just does not perform well relative to the gold standard. Okay, so gas and bloating, you guys, here we go. Gas and bloating 101. There are 4 major causes of gas and bloating that everyone needs to be aware of. You may have 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these if you have gas and bloating. So with that in mind, you need to basically take a look in the mirror and think about for yourself, which one of these could potentially be me? Number 1, gas that is entering your body. Okay, so when you swallow air, it has to come out either through the top or through the bottom. It's a lot easier for you if it comes out the top, because then it doesn't have to wiggle through 20 feet of intestine and cause a lot of gas and distress along the way. So what am I talking about? Guys, a straw. All right, so you have a straw in a beverage. Next time you have a straw, take a look at how much air is in that straw. Everything above the water level is air. You put your lips around it, you create a vacuum, and you swallow that air. All right, chewing gum, sucking on Jolly Ranchers or lozenges or candies. You got them in your mouth. You're salivating. Guess what you do when you salivate? You swallow. Guess what you do when you swallow? You swallow some air. I can't believe I have to say this, but I'm going to say it because it's not as obvious as it may seem. Carbonated drinks. Carbonated drinks put air into your gut, and then it has to come out the top or the bottom. All right, last thing. If you are, and by the way, I love these people. If you are an aggressive eater, I enjoy watching you eat. It's entertaining to me. But if you are an aggressive eater, you eat very fast. You drink with big gulps. You got to slow down. You got to slow down, because that is bringing air down into your gut. So, and those people feel bad after a meal because they're bloated. All right, so number 1, swallowed air. Number 2, motility. So your motility can affect how much air you trap. Constipation causes increased production of gas and bloating. Now here's where it gets interesting. Methane gas produced because you're constipated slows down motility. Vicious cycle. Constipation causes methane gas causes constipation. How do we break the cycle? Get yourself pooping. Get yourself pooping. When you poop, we don't have that issue. So when my patients are constipated, and I could talk all day about constipation, I literally taught a course on this earlier this year.
Well, that was another question of mine, was a ton of them asked about constipation. Like, they have chronic constipation, even though they're taking magnesium and fiber and all these things. So go for it.
Well, we're gonna run out of time and not be able to cover these things in adequate detail. But motility, and maybe we can come back to constipation a little bit right at the end here. So slow motility with constipation causes increased gas and bloating. The solution is to get the bowels moving. Your body thrives on rhythm, right? So when you are out of rhythm, digestion is not going to work the way it's supposed to. All right, so swallowed air, number 1. Constipation or altered motility, number 2. All right, your diet is number 3. And what I'm saying there is that your dietary choices can affect the amount of gas that your body produces. So, like if you have sucrase deficiency and you're consuming a lot of table sugar, you're going to have a ton of gas. All right. There is a diet called the low FODMAP diet. It is best implemented with a registered dietitian to guide you. It is not best implemented by reading something on the internet. But that can help people. That can help people who have gas and bloating. Last thing, if you consume, this is like straight up truth, okay? If you got gas and bloating and you consume dairy or you are using artificial sweeteners, get rid of them right now. Get rid of the dairy.
Artificial sweeteners. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Carolyn, artificial sweeteners will cause, I had a patient once, Carolyn, who was having like massive chronic diarrhea. All right. And I said to him, can you go home and keep a food diary of what you're eating? Now, the food diary itself did not reveal anything, but guess what popped up? This patient was chewing gum that had artificial sweeteners. The artificial sweeteners in the gum were causing massive chronic diarrhea. Artificial sweeteners cause gas and bloating and diarrhea. I'm telling you guys.
And artificial sweeteners are in all the low fat, low sugar, all these calorie things that all these women eat on a daily basis to try to lose weight and stay trim and healthy.
Yeah.
I talk about it all the time, so I'm so glad you said that.
Oh my gosh. There's no role for artificial sweeteners. We can do so much better. So, all right. So, number 1, swallowed air. Number 2, constipation, poor motility. Number 3, things in your diet. Get rid of the dairy, get rid of the artificial sweeteners. You can consider a low FODMAP diet. And then finally, last but not least, is your microbiome. When you have a damaged gut, part of what your gut microbes do is help you to process and digest your food. So when you have a damaged gut, you are going to struggle more and you're going to have more food sensitivities or intolerances. So we need to repair, restore the gut. We do this with our diet, and the concept is low and slow. You introduce foods low and slow. You introduce fiber low and slow, and you ramp it up over time so that your gut, which is adaptable, literally our studies show in 24 hours you can change your gut. So give your gut a chance, give it time to adapt to what you're doing, and you will find that that actually when the gut becomes adapted to what you're doing, the gas and bloating are reduced and you feel so much better.
Okay, so 2 questions. One, I got a ton, and you just touched upon this. So many asked, how do you fix a damaged gut? And is it purely the low and slow of just adding more and more fiber in, or is there something else that they should do?
Gosh, I mean, not to plug my book, but like this is what the book is about, right? And so it's hard for me in 60 seconds to completely summarize this, but there is the dietary element, okay? And yes, fiber, but specifically variety, getting a wide variety of different plants. You know, you can eat more fiber, but if you're not getting variety, then you're not going to feed all these gut bugs. But then I think what often gets overlooked is we fixate on diet and we lose track of all of the other stuff, like quite simply, getting a good night's rest, having an early dinner, and then like fasting, you know, not anything necessarily ridiculous, but just like literally you have your dinner and then nothing after dinner, and you wake up the next day and you haven't had any food in 12 hours. Guess what? That's great for your gut. 12 hours is a great place to start. So exercise, spending time with loved ones. Like Carolyn, there's a really interesting study that I came across recently. They found that people that were in healthy relationships had healthier gut microbiomes.
I think you that in the podcast.
Yeah, and what was fascinating about it is that the benefit was most profoundly seen in the people who felt most connected to their partner.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
I love, so you do talk a lot on the podcast about repairing the gut with the sleep and, you know, exercise and blocking the blue light, stuff like that. And so if you guys have questions about that, go listen to the podcast or even read his book, Fiber Fueled. It's a great book. But, you know, something that I've been focusing on, because you talked about circadian rhythm and how that affects your gut with sleeping. So since that podcast, I've really been paying attention to that for my sleep cycle, and it's amazing. You do feel better. So anyway,
Sleep is such a, we underrate sleep, and yet we spend like a third of our life sleeping.
right.
And, literally 1 extra hour of sleep can be the difference between health and unhealth.
I believe it. I believe it. Okay, so can we touch upon constipation really quick?
Yeah.
I know I've mentioned that really quick, but people have said, like, I'm eating fiber, I'm taking magnesium, but chronic constipation. So what do you say to something like that?
Okay, so many people, they've heard, oh, fiber is good for constipation. And they assume, like, Dr. B wrote the book on fiber, so he must love fiber for constipation. No, what I love is I love results. I love people getting better. And fiber and, hydration and exercise, those things will work for the person who has mild constipation. All right. But the problem is that's not who I see in my clinic. The people who are coming in to see me, and I suspect that many of the people who are on the internet looking for solutions, they don't have mild constipation, they have moderate or severe constipation. So a few things. Number one, it always starts, always, with understanding the root of the issue. Okay. So we need to understand, like, what is fueling this constipation. Take a look at your medications and ask, including supplements, and ask the question, could one of these be the cause of my constipation? And in fact, consider talking to your primary physician or one of your healthcare providers about your medication and supplement list to see if there's anything in there. All right. It's quite important for people to know that we have revised how we think about constipation. It's not the outdated model that most people think of, oh, you just like have a sluggish gut. There are some people like that, but actually what we've discovered, Carolyn, is that there are several different causes of constipation. One of them is the pelvic floor. And it's extremely important for people to know because it's like this. Let me give a quick analogy. Imagine that you have this bathtub, okay? And the bathtub has a drain that's closed, and you want to empty the bathtub, all right? Would you pour liquid plumber into that bath water? No, you would open the drain.
Yeah, exactly.
And the problem is that people who have pelvic floor issues, the drain is closed, and it's not opening, and it's not relaxing. And so I'm going to use my hands. It's a little bit weird, but people who have taken my course, they've seen me do this. All right, so let me show you guys what happens during bowel movements, okay? I'm going to start with a normal, healthy bowel movement, and I just want you to know, like, I literally do this kind of stuff all day long for a living, so that's why I feel so comfortable talking about this, so I hope you don't mind.
No, that's great.
So, okay, that's the last part of your colon. And this right here, in between the heels of my palms, is the anal canal where it relaxes so that you can poop, okay? So watch this. In a normal bowel movement, okay, I'm talking about a normal bowel movement, here's how this works. There is a pinch in the rectum, and it propagates forward like this, and it's pushing everything with it. And as this happens, the poop is right in here. As this happens, the pelvic floor relaxes, and it makes way, and out that goes, okay? That's a relaxed, healthy bowel movement. That's the way that our body was meant to work. But unfortunately, for many people, that's not the way that it works. They strain, they push. All right, so let me show you the way that this works in a person that has a pelvic floor dysfunction, okay, which there's a term that we use for this. It's called pelvic dyssynergia. What happens here is you get that pinch, and it's pushing, pushing, pushing. Okay, the poop is right here. Pressure is building. But whoa, whoa, whoa. The bottom is not relaxing. So pressure is building. You're straining, okay? So you're like bearing down. You're trying to build up pressure in this area, but the bottom is not relaxing. In fact, in many cases, what happens is it actually clamps down. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that's me like creating more pressure in the anal canal. So paradoxically, it's supposed to relax. Instead, it clamps down, and you can't get it out. It's stuck. All right. So what happens? You squeeze, you push, you bear down so hard until what happens is you get a quick little ting ting, like just like snaps open and shut, and out comes this little nugget. All right. And that's not like you didn't evacuate.
Right.
It's not really a bowel movement. So I think it's important for people to understand, particularly the person who goes 7 days without a bowel movement, that pelvic issues can be part of the problem. This is more common among women. We don't know where it comes from, why it occurs. It does happen in part due to childbirth and can manifest like literally decades later. Another thing that can happen, you can have what's called a rectocele. All right, now the rectocele is not actually about the anal canal this time, but it's in the rectum. Here's what happens. You're going to poop, okay? And the bottom is relaxing, but all of a sudden, boom, whoa, what's that over there? This is a pocket. That's what a rectocele is. And this pocket basically diverts the poop over here. So rather than going out the bottom, it diverts over here. And so that's another cause of constipation. So here's the point that I want people to know. Two quick points. Number one, not all constipation is slow motility. You can have a pelvic floor dysfunction. You can have a rectocele. So be conscious of that in your conversations with your doctor. There are tests that can be done to search for that. All right, number two, we're going to take it home here, guys. You could poop every day and still be constipated.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you don't completely evacuate, I see these people in my clinic every day. They come in, they go, I got gas and bloating. I'm having discomfort in my left lower quadrant. A little bit of queasiness. I've lost my appetite. A lot of fatigue. All right. These are symptoms of constipation. I know it instantly that this person is constipated. Gas and bloating is the number one symptom of constipation. You could have pain in the left lower, the left upper, the right upper, or even the right lower, or even around the belly button. Those could all be manifestations of constipation. Many people will get queasiness or nausea. You don't throw up, but you just feel queasy. Many people will lose their appetite. They will get full very quickly. The reason for all three of those, by the way, the nausea, the queasiness, the loss of appetite, and getting full quickly, is that your stomach is not emptying anymore. So your stomach is, yeah.
Because you think if you go every day, then you're not constipated.
Right. So, but here's the problem. If you go 70%, but you trap 30%, that 30% starts to back up and compounds every single day. If you're not completely evacuating, then you're not really emptying.
But how would someone even know?
So
gas and bloating, I guess?
That's the
signs
issue.
Of constipation?
That's the issue. It's the signs of constipation. So like in my patients, I will treat them until those symptoms are gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I learned something new.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have two other questions for you. So one, a lot of people say when I increase my fiber, so sorry, we're moving off of health issues now, moving away from constipation, if that's okay. But I want to grab two more questions before we end. One, a lot of them were saying as they add more fiber, they feel like they have more gas and more bloating and it hurts. So they don't like to add in fiber. So suggestions for that, or why is that?
When you make a dietary change, no matter what that dietary change is, no matter what direction you're moving with your diet, you are asking your gut microbes to adapt to something that you haven't asked them to do in the past. Your gut microbes are adapted to whatever your diet has been for the last 2 months. So if you start introducing more fiber, oh, I heard Dr. B on the Just Ingredients podcast, I'm going to start cranking up the fiber. Well, the problem is now you are asking your gut to adapt to what you're doing, and you're challenging it. A little bit of gas and bloating is actually a good thing, because what that means is that you're challenging your gut and it's ready to step up to the occasion and grow stronger. Like exercise. When we exercise, we'll be sore, and that's a sign that we're getting stronger. All right. But if you go too fast, you go too hard, you make radical changes, it can be quite miserable. So you have to go low and slow. Catherine said it in the chat box. You have to go low and slow.
See it, yeah.
Just nice and easy, slow and steady wins the race. And the other thing to bear in mind is that if you have something else going on from a medical perspective, and we just got done talking about constipation, the number one cause of gas and bloating is constipation. The number one cause of food intolerance is constipation. In my patients who are constipated, even though like everyone thinks that when they come to see me, you know, people are like, I can't wait to see Dr. B. He's going to tell me what to eat. And I go, I'm not changing your diet. You got to start pooping. Okay?
Oh, that's
You got to
funny.
start pooping, and then I will increase your fiber.
Okay, that's good to know. Just take, and then they'll adjust as they slowly increase more fiber, right?
Exactly. And if you feel like it's too much, back down on the fiber just a little bit, and then give your body a little more time to adjust to what you're doing.
Okay. A big question that people asked.
Uh-oh.
But now I'm always afraid to ask you these questions because I've been asking you hard ones. They want to know if organic food is truly better for the gut versus foods with like glyphosate.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let me lead with this, okay? I acknowledge that organic food is more expensive than non-organic food. And that is a travesty because that is a product of our government choosing not to subsidize organic food when they should.
Right.
All right. And so with that said, I think it's important for people to know, like when I say eat more plants, I just want you to eat more plants wherever you can. And I would rather that you eat non-organic plants than not eat plants.
Right.
I would, you know, replacing it with like Twinkies or something like that. Like, whoa, don't be doing that. So, all right, quite clearly, glyphosate is damaging to microbes.
Okay.
Could be microbes in your gut. It could be microbes in the soil. The soil has a microbiome, right? So when we consume foods that have been sprayed with glyphosate, this includes genetically modified soy, genetically modified corn. This includes also wheat, which, by the way, it's not a genetic modification thing. They're not trying to make the wheat survive being sprayed with glyphosate. They're actually drying out the wheat
Right.
by using
They
glyphosate.
do that with oats all the time now. So Quaker oats that everybody used to buy back in my day in the 70s and 80s were fine. Now the Quaker oats have the glyphosate.
Right, because in their space, in like the, hey, we're trying to create food as quickly as possible, and in their space where there's a CEO who basically is going to either get promoted or fired based upon profit and loss. The shareholders are holding that person accountable. So you got to crank up your profits. So guess what? Shortcuts crank up profits.
Right.
Right. So it's a sad thing because it's clearly glyphosate is not good for the gut microbiome. Now, I do want to touch on the environment in a second with glyphosate because I do think that that's an important conversation that we need to be real about with the world that we live in today. But before I go there, let me just say that there are certain rules that I apply, and Caroline, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on this. But I try to eat as organic as I possibly can. I'm imperfect. It's not always organic, but I do my best. Again, plants are better non-organic than no plants at all.
Right.
But a general rule that I will use, or I will encourage people with, is if the skin is thin, buy organic for the win.
Oh, that's a good saying.
Okay? If the skin is thin, buy organic for the win. So I'm talking about greens and apples and berries, pears. If you're going to bite into the skin, well, that's the part that's being sprayed.
Right.
So that's where we want to invest our money into buying organic. That's where it's really most beneficial. On the flip side, if the skin is thick, it doesn't have to be organic, but I want to give a caveat to that in a moment here. But like I'm talking about bananas and oranges and avocados, where you're not eating the skin, you're peeling it off and you're tossing it. All right.
Right.
Now here's the caveat. So the caveat to this is that
You know what, Dr. B, I'm going to